GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym but after this. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're going to win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But, Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and the barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening. You're watching State of the Nation on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. Coming up on the show tonight, as President Donald Trump pauses foreign aid, is it time for the UK to do the same and instead spend that money on people here in Britain? And breaking tonight, in the last few hours, a bombshell new opinion poll has, for the first time ever in British political history, put Nigel Farage and the Reform Party on top, ahead of Labour and the Tories. Argentinian President Javier Milei has used his platform at the World Economic Forum in Davos to attack the British government. We'll be talking about whether he is right to do so. Plus, do charities need to stay out of politics? Do we need to take on the charity industrial complex? That's State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. It's going to be a great show with great guests. Let's go. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and political journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grunderwald. As ever, let me know your views, gbnews.com/you're saying. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But now, it's time for the news with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Matt. Your top story this evening. Storm Eowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. One in five flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have already been cancelled today, and millions of people have been urged to stay home. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are without power in Northern Ireland, and a wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and the south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities have warned all commuters to avoid travel at all costs. And the Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class. But his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana has received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack that killed Alice da Silva Aguiar, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and suggested sharing more information earlier in cases would be beneficial. Now, Scotland's first ever visitor levy for overnight stays has been approved by councillors in Edinburgh. Visitors staying in the city will have to pay a 5% fee per night, capped at 7 nights, which is expected to raise up to £50 million a year for the local authority. The charge will be applied on bookings made after the 1st of May this year for accommodation stays from July 2026. Now let me entertain you with this little bit of news. Pop star Robbie Williams has equalled the Beatles' record for the most UK #1 albums.
I got, you got, we got everybody. I got the gift, gonna stick it in the goal. It's time to move your body.
Williams' latest release, Better Man, the soundtrack to his biopic film, has become his 15th record to top the official album charts. To celebrate matching one of the most influential bands of all time, the singer posted on social media wearing a T-shirt featuring the names of the Beatles members alongside his own and thanked his fans for supporting the album and the movie. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, President Donald Trump has just paused US foreign aid for 90 days. Should the UK do the same? While 64% of Brits, nearly two-thirds of the country, think that we should reduce our foreign aid budget, according to new polling by YouGov, prioritising very real public concerns about how our government appears to prioritise international commitments over the domestic needs of our own people. In 2023, the UK's foreign aid budget, get this, reached a whopping £15.3 billion, with £4.3 billion of that sum allocated to domestic refugee programmes, a significant increase of £583 million from the year 2022. However, concerns have emerged that the allocation of funds to certain recipient countries and the potential misuse of aid are being ignored. Consider just some of these numbers, which I find absolutely mind-boggling. Of the £15.3 billion, we are sending £115 million to Afghanistan, a country run by the Taliban, which means funds could be used to inadvertently support rebuilding efforts under Taliban control. Somalia, we've sent £98 million to Somalia, a country which has a history of UK aid falling into the hands of al-Qaeda affiliate al-Shabaab, while Somalians here in Britain are also among the most likely to be given social housing, again paid for by the British taxpayer. Pakistan was sent £69 million and is forecast to get £133 million this year, a country who had some nationals implicated as key figures in the rape gang scandal here in Britain. £58 million went to Bangladesh, a country who undermined UK efforts to strip citizenship from Shamima Begum, a British-born woman who entered Syria to join Islamic State at the age of 15 in 2015, who was eligible for Bangladeshi citizenship. And lastly, Kenya was sent another £48 million, a country where human rights campaigners continue to seek reparations for colonial-era grievances. The Taxpayers Alliance campaign group revealed that in 2024, £536 million is being spent on 10 active funding programmes focused on supporting farmers and farming communities overseas, while here in Britain, the Labour government just smashed family farms that have been operating in this country for generations to save £500 million. In other words, we're sending 15 billion quid overseas while we're taking winter fuel payments off British pensioners on these islands to save £1.5 billion annually. I don't know about you. I think this is absolutely bonkers. I think it represents a betrayal of British people. I think it undermines our national community, our sense of solidarity. But as always, I want to know what you think at home. So hit me up at gbnews.com/yoursay, or on X, you can find me at Goodwin MJ. Now, with me tonight to talk about this, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and political journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grundeveld. Ellie, 64% of Brits are saying, let's cut foreign aid, let's reduce it. Donald Trump's just paused it in the US. Is this where the mood music is going? Is it time for Britain to actually slash the amount that we're sending overseas and spend it instead on British people here?
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, really. Rachel Reeves is very happy to hand out cash to everyone else while clobbering Britons with record amounts of tax hikes. I mean, we've not only spending a lot of money on foreign aid, although, to be fair, Reeves did cut it in the budget to 13.3 billion, down from 15 billion. But also, we're spending money on giving up the Chagos Islands. That's another £9 billion. That's everyone else is happy. You know, they're happy to hand over cash to everyone else other than our own. Meanwhile, £22 billion is being taxed on the national insurance increase, etc., which of course is in turn leading to job cuts. Actually, companies are cutting jobs at the fastest rate since 2009.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
today.
businesses are closing, which in turn relates into business confidence and consumer confidence in the UK economy, absolutely nosediving. And now, of course, we see Reeves is left with a tiny, measly £1 billion fiscal headroom, which leaves her with either having to raise taxes again or cut public spending. So why are we spending money abroad when we should be focusing on our own?
15 billion, Zoe, is a big number, and I think the thing that lots of people at home will probably be struggling with, they'll be reading about what's going on in the NHS, people getting treatment in corridors, nurses treating British people in car parks, in hospital gyms, families having to say goodbye to loved ones in crowded public places, but we're sending 15 billion to places like Somalia, Kenya and so on. I mean, lots of Brits are struggling with this.
Yeah, and I can completely understand why. You know, you're absolutely right to point out the state of public services, which are appalling in this country. But I think we need to think of foreign aid in a slightly different way. It isn't... I mean, I think it's easy to think of it as a kind of begging bowl situation, you know, where pots are being kind of banged around and we're chucking some coins in. But I think, really, a lot of the kind of purpose of foreign aid is also to keep the UK safe. So when we are giving money to other countries, that's because other countries' securities directly impacts us. If we think back to the COVID pandemic, we saw how quickly an issue in one country can spread across the world and cause issues for us here. I think we also have a moral obligation to think about other people. You know, if there are countries that are war-torn, if there are countries experiencing famine, energy crises, whatever it is, not only does that impact us, but we have to think about the impact it has on people there and how we can help them. I think it also, you know, having a more secure world where people are able to, you know, put money into research, are able to share their resources, I think that makes us more secure. I think it makes us safer. Now, you're absolutely right to raise the point that you know, we need to be sure that this money is going into the right hands. So, of course, we know that climate aid, foreign aid, it has been subject to corruption, and we know that, and we should do everything we can to make sure that the systems that are getting aid into the country are transparent, and that we are doing more to make sure that they are falling into the right hands and that the people in those countries are seeing the results, not just corrupt dictators, for example. I think that is important.
Making us safer.
Of course it's important. But you say that, but so from 2000 to 2023, the UK spent £3.5 billion on foreign aid to Afghanistan, right? And the government watchdog, the Independent Commission for Aid, discovered that actually it failed to achieve any stability in the region, obviously, and was involved in human rights abuse and corruption. Yeah. It was funded, you know, £252 million was funding the police. So
that goes to my point. Then
it does, but how would you fix that otherwise? How can you know that it's going into the right hands?
Well, I think we need better structures in place globally to make sure that this money is being taken by the right people and spent in the right way. And I think actually that requires more collaboration, not less. I mean, the issue is if we all stopped providing foreign aid, you have countries that are going to deal with, you know, the climate crisis, for example, is going to be hugely impact a lot of countries. You're going to have far more people affected by that. We're going to see mass migration. You know, no man is an island. We can't just shut our doors and think that none of that happening in the rest of the world is going to affect us. It is. Now, we can talk about the money. I don't know. I'm not an expert in foreign aid. I'm not an expert on what all these countries need. I don't know how much money is appropriate. But I do think foreign aid does keep us safer. And we need to think about, you know, we need to have a conversation about what that...
But how does it make it safer? I mean, it's so expensive as well. I mean, as you said, was it £4.5 billion of which was relocating...
domestic refugees.
Yeah, refugees to here.
Yeah.
Right. And as we know, that puts a huge burden on our public services.
But if we don't help other countries when they are facing things like war, famine, climate crisis, there's only going to be more refugees. And it's in our interest.
There'll also be lots of people watching the show saying, you know, $3.5 billion to Afghanistan. We just smashed British pensioners to save $1.5 billion for winter fuel payments. So why can't we work through the list of problems that we have here in Britain, which are, as you say, quite acute?
Yeah, no, they are.
You know, winter fuel payments for pensioners, fixing the NHS,
our benefit cap,
having more police officers on streets, fixing the borders. I mean, the one thing that I didn't say in the opening there is we spend £5.5 billion a year on our broken asylum system. Why don't we fix these problems first, take a pause on foreign aid, come back to it in 2030, say, OK, we're ready, we fixed the problems for the Brits.
I don't think the world can wait that long. We're already seeing the impacts of the climate crisis, for example. I mean, look at what we saw in LA recently. Other countries, Mexico and Canada, they had to help.
That was also mismanagement from the Democrats.
But
I mean,
mismanagement didn't cause the fire, did it? The fire was a result of rising temperatures and the winds and all those kind of geographical factors.
But it spread so quickly.
The alternative on that, Ellie, is Trump has said, let's leave the Paris... Well, he's left the Paris Agreement.
Yes.
Now, we've given $11.5 billion to the Paris Agreement. Why don't we exit that, spend $11.5 billion on fixing the NHS?
Exactly. Perfect example. This is why Trump's done so well, right? Because he's all about America first. And this is why he won the popular vote. Because people are now thinking you've actually got to look after your own public services, better living standards, and then you can focus on other people. And if you're not a rich country in the beginning, because you're clobbering your businesses and workers with huge tax hikes to spend on things like foreign aid, etc., and GDP growth is expected to not increase as much as it would do as it before Reeves's bombshell budget, then how can you actually help the rest of the world?
It's in our country's economic interest to have other trading partners. We need other countries in the world to be able to produce things and to be able to survive.
Can I pick you up on a specific example? Because this is one I struggle with. So we're giving, I think, about 90 million, something like that, to Somalia. But if you look at the data on what's happening when people from Somalia are then coming to the UK, they have extremely high rates of unemployment. They have extremely high rates of social house, renting social houses. They don't seem to be producing or contributing too much to our national economy. And I think, Brits are getting hit twice. We're sending all of this money overseas. They're then... their nationals are coming here, but not really actively contributing to the economy. How can we explain how I don't want to pick... You're not here to represent the Labour Party and the left, but I would say, how do people on the left explain that to British people?
Well, foreign aid isn't going to be a fix-all. We can't say we send this money out and everything's going to be fixed. We can look at particular successes in countries. So I don't know about Somalia as a specific example, but, for example, we talked about Afghanistan. Yeah, you're right, there is evidence. There was a report that said that most of our efforts there actually did fail. But what we did do is we did help bring education to hundreds of thousands of women in Afghanistan. We did reduce mortality rates. There is lots of evidence that some of the stuff we did was impactful for particular groups, particularly women and girls. I would say that's a good thing.
That is a good thing, but at what cost?
Yeah, well, no, but this is all about making sure that aid is spent, I think, correctly, targeted correctly, and definitely ensuring that the transparency mechanisms and the accountability mechanisms are strict and in place. And I think we could do much better.
So, yeah, potentially not cut it completely, don't spend any money on foreign aid at all, but you could certainly reduce it by billions.
And you could be more efficient with the money you do spend, is what I'm saying. I don't know enough about all these countries to tell you what exact figure I would put on it, but what I do think is more important is that we have the procedures in place so the money is spent correctly.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that with nearly two-thirds of the country saying let's actually reduce foreign aid, let's actually prioritise Brits before sending money overseas, this isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, it looks like, if anything, the Trump position on pausing foreign aid and saying let's just reevaluate what is actually working in our national interest is probably going to set the zeitgeist for what happens here in Britain and Europe. But let's see. Now, look, coming up after the break, this is a bombshell poll today. It came out showing for the first time in British political history, get this, Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, they're not just joint top, they're not sharing the lead, they are top on their own. They're ahead of the Conservatives and the Labour Party. This is a seismic moment in British politics. I'm going to be joined next by the chairman of Reform to talk through what this means for his party and where he thinks things are going next. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right, but before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories, and what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay, when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that it's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source, and then summarises them into one. That's going to be my question. Into one alert.
Looks to me like you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely.
So the BBC News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation. Yes. And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes, but when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it, and sends it out, even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, you've been getting in touch from home. Claire says, what I'd like to know is what countries send us aid, and if any, and how much. Barbara said, we, the taxpayers, we've never been asked if we want our money spent overseas. Why is that? And Neil says, let's cut all foreign aid apart from natural disaster relief, which involves rescue workers and is a fraction of the cost. Keep your views coming in. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Now, breaking tonight in the last few hours, a bombshell new poll has, for the first time in British political history, put Nigel Farage and the Reform Party on top, ahead of Labour and the Tories. Yep, you heard that right. The polling company Find Out Now asked the question, if a general election was called tomorrow, how would you vote? Here are the numbers. 26% said Reform, 23% said the Tories, 22% said Labour. It is a staggering rise for a party that is still only a few years old. However, will Reform be able to turn that popular support in the polls into hundreds of MPs in the House of Commons? Some analysis today suggests that poll would put Reform on around 190 seats in the House of Commons, up from 5 seats today. Now, with first past the post, it's not going to be easy. So to talk about that poll and what's going to come next is the chairman of the Reform Party, Zia Youssef, and my panel is still with me. Zia, number 1 in the polls, what's driving it?
What's driving it is the British people can see in Nigel Farage and our MPs a vision in which the United Kingdom once again becomes an extraordinary country with patriotic, highly capable leaders. They are sick and tired after 14 years of Tory disaster, of incompetence, duplicity and corruption, where there was no economic growth at all. Energy bills went through the roof because of their crazy net zero policies. They exploded the size of the population, Matt, as you know, because you looked at this and talked about this as much as anyone, by 6.5 million people net during their 14 years. we've had hundreds of thousands of people come here illegally across the Channel. They built no infrastructure, no hospital, nowhere near enough hospitals. So tens of thousands of British people have to wait 3 days or more in accident and emergency. That people can't get a GP appointment. Built virtually no new prison places, which means that there's violent criminals terrorising people across the country because there's nowhere to put them. So, and now with this Labour Party, what they've done is take all of the appalling things the Tories did and pour gasoline on it. So for the first time in 100 years, Matt, we have a historic breaking of the stranglehold of the two old parties in this country, and I think it's an incredible thing.
So going from 14% of the general election last July to 26% today, have you got any idea as to who is joining the reform revolt? Do you have any? Are they mainly ex-Tories? Are they mainly ex-Labour? Are they none of the above? Have you looked at this internally?
Yeah, we've looked at it very closely. So both with the internal data that we have and the polling that we do, but also just anecdotally from the thousands of people that we speak to on doorsteps. And obviously we've done a number of events. You know, no one's done more meaningful political events than us since the general election. It's absolutely, it's former Tory party members. A lot of Tory Labour voters have come across to us as well, but also a lot of people have never engaged in politics at all, including a lot of Gen Z, very young people. You know, we're polling at 20% amongst 18 to 25-year-olds. To put that into context, the Tories are in the single digits, in the mid-single digits there. So when we say the Tories are going extinct, that's not actually even a partisan comment anymore. That is just an objective observation of the facts when you look at how pitiful their support is among young people. So what that means is reform is appealing to a wide array of people in this country. We're the only party with cross-generational support. As I said, the Tories basically have no supporters below 35. Labour have no supporters above 60. And so we're the only party with cross-generational support, which again speaks to the inspiration that Nigel is giving people.
So what about this argument that actually, yes, it's fine if you look at the polling and it's, you know, things should be going well for a party like Reform, given everything that's happening in the country. We've got an unpopular Labour government. We've got, you know, high rates of immigration. We're probably already in recession. But what about this argument that actually, even despite all of that, a first-past-the-post, two-party system is an absolute nightmare for disruptors and insurgents? I mean, how are you really going to turn this significant level of support that the polling suggests is out there into a machine that is capable of winning constituencies in first-past-the-post? Because the obvious example to bring up is the Social Democratic Party in the 1980s, where they got to, actually, 25%, which is where you are in the polls today. But they couldn't quite replace the Labour Party, which, of course, finished, I think I'm right in saying, in 1983, a couple of points ahead of the SDP, and then the insurgents failed to flip the system. How can you actually overcome this enormous barrier?
Well, that's all I think about every day. You know, I work as a volunteer, giving this all of my time. It is what Nigel has actually put the majority of his time into, which is actually how do we build an enduring and durable political party that will not only be the next party of government, but will actually become the new natural party of government in the United Kingdom. It's why we ratified a new constitution with our members. A huge amount of thought went into that for that very reason. Nigel has handed over ownership of what was a private limited company, limited by shares, to one that will now be a not-for-profit, limited by guarantee. That is about to be approved by the Electoral Commission. And then we've been building branches, Matt, across the country. 7 months ago, we had 0 branches in the United Kingdom. As we speak, we have 412 branches. Our membership, you know, has gone from around 60,000 when I took over in July to 100 odd. I mean, it goes up all the time. We're at about almost at 190,000 members now, way more than the Tories. We'll pass Labour in the not too distant future, and the enthusiasm, Matt, amongst those supporters to knock on doors for us, to go and campaign, to deliver leaflets. That is the muscle memory and the infrastructure we're now building. And I will tell you this, one of the reasons I am so bullish about Nigel being the Prime Minister and the odds of that is because I can tell you the majority of the things I've worked on haven't yet become clear to the public.
Ellie, you're in Westminster every day. You are talking to pretty much everybody and anybody who matters. How concerned, firstly, are the Tories about what they're seeing in the polling? Because, you know, we're all picking up on a nervousness, a concern around Kemi Badenoch's leadership. And just talk about the Conservative side, if you can. I mean, what's their view about what's going on?
Well, I think their view is they're still very much not wanting to have a pact with you guys, as you guys have also, as you a lot have said. But CCHQ, they're not really putting a lot of effort into attacking you lot. at the moment. They're more focusing on Labour. At the moment, for you guys, you have a clean slate, right? The Tories, 14 years of mismanagement. Labour doing terribly in the polls. They're vastly unpopular. But I think they're hoping that you might potentially burn out at the moment, because every week there's a new poll that's, you know, a Reformer, neck and neck, or it's a three-way between the parties, and now you're on top, and every week there's another a former Tory defector, etc. And I think perhaps the sentiment is, well, will people get bored about talking about reform before 2029? Will you burn out?
We're hearing tonight that Wes Streeting might be giving a speech over the weekend where he comes out and attacks Nigel Farage directly. I've seen reports that he's going to talk about reform, offering a declinist narrative. I mean, tell me a bit about, you know, you're closer to the Labour Party. I mean, I look at the numbers and I think actually Labour should be concerned about what's going to happen in Wales, in the Red Wall. There's lots of Labour voters that look open to reform. Just give us a sense as to, you know, do you think now we're going to see Labour go into attack mode?
I think Labour underestimated the threat of reform during the last election. I think they, you know, perhaps regret doing that now. I think they have seen, particularly as well, the US election and how, you know, the voters there, the delivery wasn't enough, you know, despite economic growth. If it doesn't trickle down, if people don't feel it, then it doesn't matter. And across the world, people are rejecting incumbent government. So they're concerned about that. They want to deliver, but there's a worry about whether delivery will be enough. They want to change people's material circumstances. And that's why before Christmas, Keir Starmer said, it's not just about economic growth, it's about putting money back in people's pockets. They want people to feel the NHS is improving. They want to feel they're getting a doctor's appointment, that there are spades in the ground building houses, and that they have more money at the end of the day. But it's easier said than done.
Yeah. Are you nervous about this coming attack from Wes Streeting and Labour, which, according to reports tonight, is going to be coming tomorrow?
On the contrary, it is more demonstrable evidence of our success. Only a few months ago, Labour didn't want to talk about us at all. They would give total non-answers whenever one of our brilliant 5 MPs asked questions in the House of Commons. Now, Wes Streeting clearly understands, and Labour understands, who the real opposition are, the actual opposition, and as a result, he's going to come out apparently and attack Nigel. And from what I've read on social media about the things he's going to claim, you know, the idea that we're offering a vision of the UK that is declinist, well, this is the sort of delusional nonsense that has caused their poll ratings to collapse at a historic rate. Never in history has a Prime Minister's has a new Prime Minister's poll rating collapsed as fast as it has with Keir Starmer. They have not only made appalling decisions, whether it's the winter fuel allowance, whether it's a desperate attempt to give away our sovereign territory in terms of Chagos, whether it is the 2% increase in employers' national insurance, none of this was in their manifesto. The appalling cancellation, by the way, of the elections in May that were due to happen in England, which we'd all been working really hard on. 15 Tory councils of the 21 that were due, Tory-controlled councils, agreed with Labour that they should be cancelled. Labour said to the Tories, would you like to delay contact with your electorate and keep your seats for an extra couple of years? They all said yes.
I mean, it does seem, sorry, on the Labour side, you know, the big issues that are driving reform, you look at their voters, you survey their voters. I mean, I've done this, the top 2 concerns, fixing the borders, lowering immigration. But actually, the fundamentals that are driving reform are not actually going to change, are they? I mean, you know, Labour aren't really going to stop the small boats. Immigration isn't going to dramatically come down.
I think people's priorities are the economy, particularly how it affects them.
Well, immigration is number one or number 2 in the polls.
Some voters, immigration is an issue, but I would say it's more about their material living conditions. So do they feel better off after 40 years?
Do you really think that, though, with the rape gangs and with everything that's going on?
I think people care about the price of bills, the price of groceries, the money in their pocket, and the standard of living. And I think the other part of that is public services. Why is it that people can't get a doctor's appointment? Why are people waiting 3 days in A&E?
Because we've got too much immigration.
Why are people's, you know, grandmas falling over and sitting in ambulances for ages? That's what people care about. And I think Labour are hoping if they deliver those changes, people will start to feel that they have a government that's actually doing things.
Ellie, last word, if I can. I mean, reform's got a problem with managing expectations, hasn't it? I mean, this thing is taking off so quickly. I mean, you know, where's it going to go?
Well, that's the question. I mean, obviously, you're a very small party at the moment. You've only got 5 MPs. There's a lot of talk about net zero migration, etc., which obviously the public enjoy and approve of, as we've seen in the polls. However, the details, we haven't seen many details on how you're going to do this. For example, who would be your chancellor?
Okay.
What exactly?
Well, I imagine we're sitting with him.
Well,
quickly before we go to the breaks here, I mean, this is an issue, isn't it? Have you set out enough detail?
Anyone who's in any doubt about our policy should go to our website, go and look at the contract with the people, where we do have quite a lot of detail in there. In terms of who would be in our cabinet, that would be made abundantly clear at the right time to the British people. I will tell you this, not only do we have 5 incredible MPs who do a better job of holding this dystopian Keir Starmer government to account than 121 Tory MPs, I can tell you as a chairman, the explosion in the talent pool that has become available to us, some of the brightest sparks in the country, who you would never dream would have ever been interested in getting involved in politics, want to come and help, inspired, of course, by what Trump, what Vivek, has happened in the Trump administration.
Well, speaking of that, after the break, Argentina's no-nonsense President Milei has accused Keir Starmer and the British government of, and I quote, locking up people who speak against grooming gangs. Has he got a point? We're going to debate that next. See you shortly.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours sees the most damaging winds from Storm Eowyn move north, turning calmer for many with some frost and ice issues by dawn on Saturday. Here's the position of Eowyn as we go into the evening. It's going to move into Shetland, and the strongest of the winds are going to transfer northwards into central and northern Scotland. Again, the risk of 80, perhaps 90 mile-per-hour wind gusts, but for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, into northern England and North Wales, the worst is now over, and much calmer conditions are expected overnight across many parts, with some rain in the far southeast, but elsewhere clear skies allowing a widespread frost and some icy patches as well, particularly where we've got some rain, sleet and snow showers moving through Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland as well, further snow accumulations over in the hills and some icy patches here and there. But it's a blustery start to the weekend, certainly for Scotland, even if the worst of the winds by this stage are easing. Northern Ireland, much calmer first thing, and for a large part of England and Wales, it's simply blue skies and a fine winter's day is expected for England and Wales, following the blustery and often wet weather that we've seen over the last few days. In fact, in some places, barely a cloud in the sky and light winds. Very pleasant out there, although feeling on the cold side with highs of 7 or 8 Celsius. Feeling particularly cold in the north of Scotland, where those strong winds continue into the afternoon. But for Northern Ireland, we've got cloud and rain moving in, along with gusty winds. Nothing on the scale of Storm Eowyn, of course, but could be some lively weather going through the evening, crossing the country and then clearing into Sunday morning. Sunday morning starts off with the frost across northern and eastern parts of the UK. Further west, we've got the cloud building because the next low comes along, and that's going to bring some wet and windy weather into many western and southern parts of the country by Sunday afternoon. Not on the scale of Eowyn, but not particularly welcome either.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. We are speaking up for you, the forgotten majority. Now, some of you have been getting in touch. Alistair says, can Zia Youssef and Reform explain why there were 5 local council elections yesterday and Reform did not win any of them, but now they are top of the polls? It doesn't make sense to me. Tim, controversially, says, get Boris Johnson back. He might be bonkers, but he's better than Keir Starmer. Boris would smash the floor with Sir Keir. As always, let me know what you think. You can reach me at X, at GoodwinMJ. Now, let's go to Argentina. We're used to hearing an Argentinian president slamming the British government. However, this time it's not the Falklands that's got them rattled. No, President Milei has used his platform at the gathering of the global elite at Davos to attack the British government for, in his words, locking up people who speak out against the grooming gangs. before giving wokeism both barrels in the same speech. Take a look at this.
Is it not true that right now, as we speak, in the UK, citizens are being imprisoned for exposing horrifying crimes committed by Muslim migrants? Wokeism's first strategy is to discredit those of us who challenge these things, first by labeling us and then by silencing us. If you're white, you must be a racist. If you're a man, you must be a misogynist or part of the patriarchy.
Strong stuff indeed. Well, despite this not being entirely true, people are not being locked up for exposing the grooming gangs per se. Just ask the excellent GB News reporter Charlie Peters, who of course has really broken this story about the rape gangs and kept it in the headlines. This is now the narrative that has been spread around the world about our country, about our government and about our relationship with free speech. Now, time to get the views of my panel, political journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grunwald and senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley. Thank you. Ellie, Javier Milei might not necessarily be speaking the total truth here, but he is tapping into something that Elon Musk has also referenced, and there are lots of people, no doubt watching this show, who will think actually he has a point when he says people are being called racist, they're being called far-right for raising what they feel are legitimate concerns and real questions about what is happening in this country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does point to the whole two-tier care, two-tier justice narrative that actually all across the world people are talking about and concerned for Britons. I think there was a Daily Express journalist who was in, I think it was Calgary, who was in DC, who was saying
I might have been at a party.
Yeah, yeah. He was, you know, it was like, we pray for you Britons and, you know, the free speech issues and struggles that you're going through. I mean, it does, you know, for example, during the summer riots, that woman was jailed for 2 years for tweeting a horrible tweet saying, burn the migrant hotels for all I care. 2 years. Meanwhile, paedophiles and those who make category A images of children get suspended sentences. So I do think obviously what he was referring to, you know, people speaking out against grooming gangs getting locked up is obviously incorrect.
But the reality, sorry, I didn't mean to go, but sorry, the reality is that actually on the rape gangs issue, you know, one of the reasons it wasn't discussed and addressed early on was precisely because so many local officials and others were terrified of being called a racist, of being called a xenophobe, of being called an Islamophobe. And what Milei is kind of saying is, you know, the speech codes that govern our Western societies have just gone way too far.
Well, I think when some of the local authorities did their sort of local inquiries, a number of them, I think, did local inquiries into the issues, they did find that there was a sense of people, you know, not wanting to talk about what was going on. But that was also because local authorities failed to take the girls seriously. And this is deep-rooted misogyny, classism as well, that we need to address. You know, there were lots and lots of things going on there where local authorities absolutely failed these girls. 100%.
And they're still failing them. I mean, Bradford voted this week not to have a local inquiry.
Yeah, and I think there should be a local inquiry, and I think there's actually a very good argument for there to be a national inquiry as well.
Do you support a national inquiry?
I think I do. Do you know, I find it very disappointing that nobody was speaking about the Alexis J inquiry until very, very recently, because child sexual abuse across this country is an absolutely horrible fact to confront, but it is, you know, it's terrible. One of the estimations was 500,000 children a year are subject to child sexual abuse and exploitation here in the UK. It's not just grooming gangs, that's a portion of it. There's also, of course, sexual abuse that occurs in care settings, that occurs in the family home is a large proportion of it. We don't talk about that, and we should, because we're failing young children by not talking about it. And one of the things we need to do is make sure that local authorities, schools, all these institutions that are set up to protect children do protect children. They listen to them. We teach children how to talk about consent in their bodies, and we make sure that children are protected, because this is happening everywhere.
Ellie, when I was in Washington earlier this week, what I was struck by is Americans just cannot get their head around the rape gang scandal and the fact that people are going to prison here for what they write on social media in the privacy of their own home. It flies in the face of their First Amendment tradition, of their proud history of free speech. So what Milei is kind of really reflecting there is a view among a new right-leaning counter-elite that things have gone way too far in the home of Magna Carta.
Well, I think You're right, he is. But also there's a wider issue that he's talking about here. It's not just freedom of speech, but it's freedom in general, liberalism. That's the sort of main underlying theme of what he was talking about at Davos. So he actually quoted Churchill. He said, the further back you look, the further forward you're more likely to see. So he's talking about how, you know, back in the day, before the 1940s, Argentina was a really rich country before socialist President Perón came in and hit businesses with really heavy regulations, distribution of wealth, etc. There used to be a phrase, as rich as Argentina. And I mean, well, obviously, I don't remember that, I wasn't born then. But he's basically trying to bring that back. And he's succeeded in the first year in office. You know, GDP is expected to be at 5% growth. Last year, it was minus 2.8%, 170% increase in rental supply, whilst decreasing prices by 40%. So it's working. His liberalist freedom ideology is working economically as well as socially.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main
I mean, there is this sense that, you know, Argentina seems to be turning things around. Trump is, you know, shock and awe, coming out the gate with all kinds of executive orders. There's a kind of sense out there in the global elite community that we are just, you know, we're sort of insular, we're kind of, you know, totalitarian in how we deal with speech, we're throwing people into prison, we're not dealing with the rape gangs, we don't know what went on in Southport.
In the way we deal with speech. I mean, people were inciting hatred during the riots, and there should be punishment for that. You can't go out and stand in the street and say we need to burn the hotel down with migrants, and that's not, you know, no one could do that. And I think everyone would agree that that is behaviour that is dangerous and puts people at risk. And, you know, right here we're having a discussion. We're not restricted in what we can say. I'm not sure I would describe us as totalitarian. The point I think that you do make, is that clearly voters across the world are crying out for something radical.
Absolutely.
What that looks like, we're going to disagree on what that looks like. I'd probably argue that actually I'd like to see much more state spending. I'd like to see investment in the state. I'd like to see people lifted out of poverty. I'd like to see the state go back to
well, before we go into, you know, the Zoe Grunfeld political project, thank you to my panel. After the break, we're going to be asking if charities are swapping altruism for activism. Fascinating piece today that came out looking at the charity industrial complex. See you in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's a boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down that boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, you know, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over, but the idea of this shop-centred high street finished, that's gone, never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, only on GB News. Now, are charities swapping altruism for activism? I don't know about you, but it feels in recent times that charities have started concentrating less and less on actually helping people and more on denouncing the incumbent Western governments and all that they stand for. This comes in the same week that Oxfam released a report blasting poor government in India, but instead of blaming the Indian administration, actually decided that this was all the fault of, you guessed it, the British Empire. I'm joined now by the assistant comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, who has been tracking what's happening in what she calls the charity industrial complex for some time. Poppy, there was a great piece in The Spectator today by Guy Dampier, who was saying that charities have basically become hyper-political. They're no longer actually about helping people. They are about pushing an agenda. I mean, is he right? Is this what's going on?
He's completely right. I think when you talk about charity, the first thing that people think of is the nice old lady standing outside of the supermarket, rattling a collection box saying, you know, care for kids or care for the donkeys or something. But I think what's really important is that the British people realise that most big charities now are not built on the basis of small donations from well-meaning people. They're often run by people with a massive financial endowment that are being run for explicitly political causes. So Guy brings up the example of Oxfam, but there are also, it's particularly true with immigration charities, asylum aid, a joint council for refugees. There are literally hundreds of these charities that nobody has ever heard of.
And the numbers are mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. I mean, you know how much money we can spend in UK politics during the election. We're not the US. We're capped at about £40 million a year. That is small fry for some of these charities. I mean, they are spending hundreds of millions of pounds.
I mean, the stat that Guy has is 200 million of British taxpayer funding, the people watching this show, 200 million going to charities that are campaigning against stopping the small boats.
Yeah, and let's be really clear here. Some of this money is actually coming directly from government grants. So in the example of asylum aid, it will sometimes be given on behalf of the government for translation services or legal aid. These charities then take a pretty explicitly political stance. So during the Rwanda plan, for example, that was done under the Conservative government, there were very inflammatory statements being made about Suella Braverman. There were legal challenges mounted by these same charities that received government money against the government. We were literally paying them to mount legal challenges against our own democratic policy.
It's insane.
If you wonder now today, when you pull a lever and nothing happens, you know, say, I want this policy, I want this to happen in government, and it doesn't actually end up happening, we can look at some of these charities for why. This is the real dark money that's in politics, and I don't know why we're not having a conversation about it.
So let's just talk about what we can do about it, because like many people watching the show, I'm utterly fed up with the state of the country and this sort of charity industrial complex. You see Trump going after NGOs and others in the US, he's saying if it's not working for taxpayers, if it's not supporting the national interest, I'm not going to have it. I mean, what could we do in the UK to get our arms around this industry, strip it down, make it work for the people watching the show?
Well, first things first, let's make sure they're real charities. A real charity should have at least half of the money coming in every year coming from donations from actual people. That can't just be coming from these big charitable dark money trusts. The second thing we should be doing is be making it very, very clear There are no loopholes. You cannot be politically campaigning and have privileged legal status as a charity. That means if you are saying things about politicians that is only going in one direction, you will be stripped of your charity status. At the moment, we only strip about 10 or so organisations a year. We need to start seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of these groups being cracked down upon.
Now, if they were here, they would be saying, well, look, actually, we need this funding, we need these government grants, we need this support to do the good work, to have an impact in the wider world. I mean, what would you say to that?
Well, I'd say, sorry, we live in a democracy. I'd like free money too, but that's not how things work. When people vote a certain way, they expect their politicians to carry out those political agendas for them. Just because you think you have a moral high ground in some way doesn't mean you're allowed to spend millions of pounds fighting that agenda.
I mean, sorry, the government should not be bankrolling charities that are then working against the government agenda.
But so the thing I don't understand is when a charities campaign becomes a political campaign, what is the explicit difference between a campaign and a political campaign? Because surely a lot of what charities are working for have political elements to them.
That's a really
they're linked to this, they're linked to state policy decisions. So if they're campaigning for something, it might be against government policy, it might not, or it might be in favour of government policy. Does that make it political, or is that just part of their aim?
I think there's actually a pretty healthy line here. For example, if you're a homelessness charity, you're going to be engaging in politics in some way because you want to stop homelessness from being such a big problem. The difference, I think, is when you're a charity that's, say, advocating on behalf of refugee rights, I don't think it's within legitimate status of what you're doing as a group to be mounting legal challenges against the government or to be putting out those inflammatory statements about politicians. That, to me, is clearly crossing a line of legitimate.
Ellie, if I can bring you in briefly, I mean, the government's got to get its arms around this, right? I mean, the British taxpayer watching this show is like, this is outrageous.
Well, I have to say, when I read this report, I was absolutely shocked. £200 million of taxpayers' money going towards charities to fight against what the government was trying to... I mean, it's so ironic, isn't it? And it's completely undemocratic, as you said.
It is absolutely mind-boggling. Everyone out there thinks it's mind-boggling. I think it's mind-boggling. It has to stop. That's all from me tonight. Now, stay tuned for Patrick Christis, because he is going to be on in a few minutes, right here on your screens. I'm going to be back here next Wednesday. I hope you have a great weekend. Good night. Thanks for watching State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours sees the most damaging winds from Storm Eowyn move north, turning calmer for many with some frost and ice issues by dawn on Saturday. Here's the position of Eowyn as we go into the evening. It's going to move into Shetland, and the strongest of the winds are going to transfer northwards into central and northern Scotland. Again, the risk of 80, perhaps 90 mile-per-hour wind gusts. But for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, into northern England and North Wales, the worst is now over, and much calmer conditions are expected overnight across many parts, with some rain in the far southeast, but elsewhere clear skies allowing a widespread frost and some icy patches as well, particularly where we've got some rain, sleet and snow showers moving through Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland as well, further snow accumulations over in the hills and some icy patches here and there. But it's a blustery start to the weekend, certainly for Scotland, even if the worst of the winds by this stage are easing. Northern Ireland, much calmer first thing, and for a large part of England and Wales, it's simply blue skies and a fine winter's day is expected for England and Wales, following the blustery and often wet weather that we've seen over the last few days. In fact, in some places, barely a cloud in the sky and light winds. Very pleasant out there, although feeling on the cold side with highs of 7 or 8 Celsius. Feeling particularly cold in the north of Scotland, where those strong winds continue into the afternoon. But for Northern Ireland, we've got cloud and rain moving in, along with gusty winds. Nothing on the scale of Storm Eowyn, of course, but could be some lively weather going through the evening, crossing the country and then clearing into Sunday morning. Sunday morning starts off with the frost across northern and eastern parts of the UK. Further west, we've got the cloud building because the next low comes along, and that's going to bring some wet and windy weather into many western and southern parts of the country by Sunday afternoon. Not on the scale of Eowyn, but not particularly welcome either.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank